Joining me now to discuss, CNN political commentator and former chairman of the Missouri Republican Party, Ed Martin, A. Scott Bolden, the former chairman of the Washington, D.C. Democratic Party and current chairman of the National Bar Association Political Action Committee, former ESPN senior editor Keith Reed, and CNN senior media correspondent and host of Reliable Sources, Brian Stelter. So, Ed, I want to start with you. Where did these comments even come from, given the president was there? He was campaigning for Luther Strange. We have North Korea. We have health care. Why is he picking this fight?
Well, I think there's two answers to that. The first one is I'm thrilled and I'm grateful again to the president for saying what most Americans feel. I mean, you know, it's really an insult to Americans if guys are kneeling about the flag. There may be people that they object to, that they should protest. Maybe they're unhappy about work conditions or something. But we, the people that die for the country and defend the country, we respect the flag. So I think the president's channeling a lot of what we feel. But the second thing is just politics. In Alabama, do you think Bear Bryant or Nick Saban would ever let their players kneel during the national anthem or disrespect the flag? Never. So, you know, he's trying to win a race for Luther Strange, and I think he did a great job. The country is talking about respecting the flag instead of employees of a team or a business disrespecting the nation. I think that's pretty neat. I think it's exciting.
But why wasn't the president as direct when he was talking about the white supremacists in Charlottesville?
Well, I think he's been direct over and over since then. I mean, I'll do it for him. We denounce white supremacists. We denounce Nazis. Like Nancy Pelosi, I denounce Antifa and their violence. That violence is unacceptable. And that's great. Let's do it over and over again. But here's the thing. If you want to kneel down, if you want to make $1 million a year to play cornerback or wherever John Marshawn, who's not a star, the guy at Buffalo, plays, he can make his millions doing something else. He can go pick up something.
Wait a minute, Anna.
He called these guys sons of peeps. He called the people who were there at that neo-Nazi rally fine people. There's a big difference there.
There's a big difference. Hey, Anna. Yeah, Anna, can I jump in here?
Go ahead.
It's amazing to me that the GOP and folks like my colleague here believe there's some connection to how much money these players make because they're talented, and somehow that's a relationship between them, their political opinions, their First Amendment right, and their ability and their right to protest the way they want to protest. They may be kneeling. You think it's disrespecting the flag. I say it's exercising their First Amendment right. I may not do it, but they could do something else to protest. And until America takes care of communities of color, of which many of these players come through, then you have no right or audacity to tell them how they're going to protest. Those same people that fought for this country, these same people who fought for this country, fought for them to have the right to exercise their First Amendment. And it's shameful that you would argue they must go work somewhere else. That's nonsense.
Anna, he's not being factually correct. He's deceiving people. Here's the
facts.
No,
I'm not. No, you're deceiving people because you don't want to recognize the First Amendment rights of these players.
Let Ed get his word in, and then Scott will come back. Go ahead, Ed.
Well, listen, if you work on a construction site in New York City and you kneel down, do you want to protest against the flag or something, you'll be fired. You could be fired. Whether you make $1 an hour, $20 an hour, or $1 million for games. The point is a private employer has the right to say how you can act. That's what the president said. And look, the people that kneel down against the flag, there's people that die for the flag. And by the way,
they died for that right for them to kneel down. No, and as a private employer, the president has no business telling a private employer what to do or not to do. You hear me?
Okay.
These are private employers. You or the president have no right to tell these individuals how to feel and how to protest and how to respond to their own personal conditions and beliefs. Because they're athletes, they don't lose the right to have a political position or to protest. That's their God-given right. And you can't dictate to them. Yes, you are. You want them fired. The president wants them fired. You can't fire them for exercising their First Amendment right. Now, if they violate some part of their contract, sure. But think about it. That's a constitutional right of theirs. And for you to criticize them or the president to talk about their mothers of all people, my goodness gracious, it's shameful. It has no place in the dialogue on this. And it shows how off base the Republicans in this White House are. Because when Tom Brady doesn't protest or doesn't go to the White House, he doesn't get attacked but black people, black athletes get attacked by people like you and the president of this United States when they have every right to be here. He shows your private privilege and your white supremacy when you attack them for those reasons.
Hey, guys, I want to get others into the conversation here. So I'm going to turn to Keith and ask you about the reaction we're seeing by the NFL, specifically by Goodell, by the Players Association. What do you make of that so far?
I think it's actually one of the most interesting things about this entire controversy that started last night with the president's comments in Alabama. When you have reached the point where Roger Goodell and the NFL are taking the moral high ground against the president of the United States, we've really reached a very, very interesting point in political discourse. I don't know if you've been paying attention in the last 3 or 4 years, but I think it's very difficult for anybody to argue that the National Football League has been in the moral vanguard about anything, whether you go to domestic violence, whether you talk about CTE, whether you talk about Colin Kaepernick or a player's right to protest. I'm not sure there are very many people before this morning when Roger Goodell put out his statement really defending the players in the NFL, in his league, from the attack by the President of the United States, that very many people would have looked at Roger Goodell for leadership on an issue like this. And I think that just shows you where we are in the public discourse. I also want to go back to one more point, if I can. This is not the first time in the history of the United States, and it's a little bit interesting to me that people are kind of acting like this is a new phenomenon where African-American athletes have been at the forefront of speaking out in terms of social change. This is not new. You can go all the way back to John Carlos and Tommy Smith. You can go all the way back to Muhammad Ali, who started his career as a man by the name of Cassius Clay, and who changed his name, converted, became a member of the Nation of Islam, lost his license to box, and spent many of his most productive boxing years banned from the sport because of the stance he took against the Vietnam War. You can look at Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who was another African-American athlete who became very, very active and very outspoken in terms of civil rights issues and in terms of issues important to the African-American community during his career. And many of those athletes have been vilified throughout their careers, not necessarily by the President of the United States, but certainly by some fans of their sports who wanted them to, as we hear again, stick to sports. And it's something that we've heard over and over and over again in the last few weeks and months, starting with Colin Kaepernick, continuing last week with the president's comments about in the White House comments about my friend and former colleague Jamel Hill, and now continuing on today, where we expect athletes to accept any treatment that might, any kind of treatment or any kind of degradation that might affect them and their communities, but we want them to stick to sports. And what we're seeing today is professional athletes, not just black athletes, but professional athletes all across the spectrum saying, no, we're not bound to stick to sports. If we are attacked, if you degrade us, if you take personal attacks, if you talk about our mothers, if we feel that the communities that we care very deeply about contribute our energy and talents to entertain and our money to support our attacked, we have the right to say something, and it is not okay for the president or for any private employer to try to abridge the right of any professional athlete or any employee or any independent contractor to be able to make whatever statement that they want to make. You don't have the right to do that in this country.
I do want to talk about the bigger picture here, because it's not just the NFL that we're talking about today, but the president also picking a fight with Steph Curry and the Warriors, essentially turning them away from coming to visit the White House, which is standard because Steph Curry said he might not want to go,
right?
And because he didn't agree with some of what he has seen by this administration.
Right. A number of the Warriors have been talking about skipping that normal visit to the White House. They were going to vote as a team, but Steph Curry says his vote will be not to go to the White House. This is part of a much broader topic. We are seeing many athletes, just like many entertainers, many business leaders, trying to avoid the Trump White House, trying to avoid being associated with Donald Trump. It is a remarkable moment in time that we're in here, that we're asking these questions, and we're asking big questions. Why is it that the president is perceived to be a racist by so many Americans? And if he is perceived that way, which he is, then why does he lean into it by attacking African-American athletes like this, whether it's Steph Curry or Colin Kaepernick?
Hold on just a second, Ed, go ahead, and then I'm going to read the statement that just came in from the Golden State Warriors. But, Ed, I'll let you respond for a moment.
Yeah, I'm just trying to be respectful because it's hard to interrupt, and I wanted to hear. But the law is very clear. When you're in your private employer, no, in the presence, I'm allowed to say we think it would be better not to. We can't fire them. We can't make them stop. But that's not what the Constitution doesn't protect that speech. But let's be clear. If I asked you guys, if I said to my panel, hey, I never met you, I would really like to buy you a cup of coffee. And the three guys, I don't know, I can't see the panel, they said, we'd like to think about it because we don't know if we like you. You know what I would say? I'll just take back my invitation. There's no reason the President of the United States should be insulted.
Why did the President take a baseball bat and swing it into this hornet's nest? Why is he talking about this at all? Why is he trying to divide the country like this, Ed?
Because he's a divider. Because he drives this narrative of race and racism in this country, but doesn't want to be held accountable for it. That's why.
Right.
Anna, if I can jump in one more time here, I think I pointed this out on your air a little bit earlier. One of the things that's happened here is that the president.
Ed, just a second, Ed. I'm so sorry. I know everybody wants to talk here. We don't want to cut anybody off, but people are passionate. Keith, you first. Let me read the statement after that, and then Ed, I'll let you react.
Sure. I think one of the things that's happened here is that the president has entered into a fray about sports that we rarely see other American presidents do. And so it's a little bit, I think, and I don't want to attack another panelist personally, but I do think it's a little bit disingenuous to say that to compare the idea of the four of us getting together for coffee or a drink to an American president breaking with tradition, which is to invite athletes to come to the White House after they've won a championship. And it is not new for professional athletes, some of them, to say that they don't want to come on the basis of who's in the White House. The most famous athlete in the NFL.
Which we saw happen after the Super Bowl as well, when the Patriots were invited. The Patriots, a big team that the president has long time supported because of his relationships, of course, with the owner, with the coach, as well as with their quarterback. But here's the statement from the Golden State Warriors, guys. They just responded to the president essentially disinviting them from the White House. They were anticipating they would be invited at least, and this is what they write. While we intended to meet as a team at the first opportunity we had this morning to collaboratively discuss a potential visit to the White House, we accept that President Trump has made it clear that we are not invited. We believe there is nothing more American than our citizens having the right to express themselves freely on matters important to them. We are disappointed that we did not have an opportunity during this process to share our views or have an open dialogue on issues impacting our communities that we felt would be important to raise. In lieu of a visit to the White House, we have decided that we will constructively use our trip to the nation's capital in February to celebrate equality, diversity, and inclusion, the values that we embrace as an organization. And before I have you react to this, Ed, let's put up the tweet from the president and show what we are now responding to with this statement from the Golden State Warriors. This was the tweet the president sent out this morning. He writes, "Going to the White House is considered a great honor for a championship team. Stephen Curry is hesitating. Therefore, invitation is withdrawn." Ed, can you really argue with that statement from the Golden State Warriors?
That's their right to say what they want to say, but let's be clear about what we're covering here. We're covering the fact that the Golden State Warriors were invited. They publicly said they're going to think about it and talk about it. Steph Curry started to say he wouldn't go. They're making it into a mockery of what happens. If you don't want to go, don't go. That's what other teams have done. Players haven't gone. And Americans are really tired of the games being played by spoiled, rich
Don't do that
athletes.
Americans thing, Ed. Don't speak for all Americans. Don't say all Americans are tired of this. You cannot speak for 100% of this country. This country is so divided, Ed, and that's what Steph Curry was trying to talk about.
He wasn't trying to talk about that. Listen,
you can't sit there and say Americans. You don't speak for all of America. This country is bitterly divided, and most of this country has no idea what the president's talking about when he says that there should be more violence.
I mean,
in NFL
here's
games.
what Steph Curry said.
The president
I
is the minority in this situation.
The Steph Curry's statement that he made that elicited this response from the president didn't poke anything at the president. He didn't even name the president in it. He said, by acting and not going, hopefully that will inspire some change when it comes to what we tolerate in this country and what is accepted and what we turn a blind eye to. It's not just the act of not going. There are things you have to do on the back end to actually push that message into motion. He's talking about injustice. He's talking about equality. Is that something the president should celebrate as well?
With justice and equality? Who could disagree with that?
Listen, no, everyone is for justice and equality. What we're saying is people can have opinions, they can speak them, there is that protection. what the president is saying, grandstanding instead of accepting the invitation. He's saying, I don't want, and when I say Americans, you guys are going to jump on me. I'm not saying all Americans, but there was an election. The election was played by rules. The rules yielded a winner. There's lots of people in America, you guys picked a number, that are looking up and saying, I'm watching these guys on this panel talk about protecting athletes, and they're stomping on the flag, figuratively. And I'm looking up and saying, you know what, guys? I would prefer somebody protest Goodell's policy on concussions, protest who makes the money off of T-shirts. But you know what? Leave the flag alone. And we're grateful.
So,
we have a president.
Right. Got to leave it there, guys.
Okay.
We are out of time.
All of that's irrelevant.
I'm getting the wrap. Scott, thank you for that. Thank you, Keith. Thank you, Ed and Brian. I appreciate the passionate discussion. Coming up,